Why didn't she scream when the first bullet hit? Most soldiers did, even the toughest ones. Pain demanded a voice. Shock forced it out, but she didn't. She just kept moving. The sand beneath her boots was already darkened in places. Smoke drifted low across the broken street. A convoy had been ambushed just minutes ago, and everything had gone wrong in seconds. The kind of wrong that no briefing ever truly prepares you for. She moved through it like she had seen it before. Because she had. Her name wasn't the kind people remembered at first. In fact, most of the team barely noticed her during the pre-mission briefing. She had sat at the edge of the table, quiet, focused, her eyes scanning maps while louder voices filled the room. "New transfer," someone had whispered. "Probably won't last," another muttered. She heard it, of course she did. But she said nothing. Now as gunfire cracked in sharp bursts around her, those same voices were gone, some silenced, some screaming, some still. And she was still moving. A second shot rang out. This one caught her side. Her body flinched, just for a second. A sharp inhale, controlled, contained, like she had trained her body not to betray her. Blood spread under her vest, warm, steady, but her hands didn't shake. Her grip on her weapon didn't loosen. Her eyes didn't lose focus. Because there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. She reached the overturned Humvee where one of the younger soldiers was trapped, his leg pinned, his breathing shallow. "Stay with me," she said quietly, dropping beside him. Her voice was calm, too calm for the chaos around them. "Medic," he gasped. She hesitated for half a second, then nodded. "Yeah." But that wasn't the full truth. Her hands moved fast, efficient. She worked through the injury like it was muscle memory, pressure, stabilization, reassurance. She blocked out the sound of incoming fire, the radio chatter, the distant explosions. All of it faded. Because right now, it was just him. Just survival. And her. Another explosion rocked the street. Dust filled the air. Someone shouted coordinates over the comms. Orders, panic. But she stayed grounded. Focused. There was a rhythm to chaos, she believed. A pattern. You just had to be still enough inside yourself to see it. The young soldier grabbed her arm. Don't leave." "I'm not going anywhere," she said. And she meant it. Even as her own strength began to slip. Even as the bleeding worsened. Even as her vision flickered at the edges. She tied the final bandage, secured it tight. "Listen to me," she said, locking eyes with him. "You're going to make it, you hear me?" He nodded weakly. But then his gaze shifted. To her side. To the blood. "You're hit." She followed his eyes for a moment. Then looked back at him. "It's nothing." A lie, but a necessary one. Because fear spreads faster than fire. And right now, she couldn't afford that. She stood up slowly, steadying herself against the vehicle. The world tilted for just a second, just enough to remind her that she wasn't invincible. No one was. Not even her. Especially not her. Another call came through the radio. "Where's the medic? We need a medic on the west flank now." She closed her eyes briefly. A choice. Stay here or move forward. Her body already knew the answer. She grabbed her rifle, adjusted her stance, and moved. Each step heavier than the last, but deliberate, controlled, like she was walking through memory instead of battle. Because in a way she was. There was a time when she wasn't this person. A time when she hesitated, when doubt crept in, when every decision felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. She remembered the training grounds, the long nights, the looks, the whispers. "You don't belong here." Too quiet. Too small. Too different. She never argued. She never tried to prove them wrong with words. She just kept showing up. again and again and again, until one day the doubt stopped being external and became something she carried inside. That was the hardest part. Not the training, not the missions, but the voice in her own head asking, "Are you enough?" A burst of gunfire snapped her back. She dropped behind cover, returning fire with precision, not wasted shots, not rushed. Every movement calculated, every breath controlled, because she had learned something over the years. Fear doesn't go away. You just learn how to carry it without letting it control you. A shadow moved across a rooftop. She saw it before anyone else did. 3 targets. High ground. She adjusted her aim. Fired. 1, 2. The third ducked. She repositioned. Ignored the pain tearing through her side. Waited. A second passed. Then another. He reappeared. She didn't miss. Silence followed, just for a moment. The kind of silence that feels louder than noise. But it didn't last. It never does. "West flank, we're losing them," someone shouted. She pushed forward again. Her boots hit the ground harder now, less grace, more urgency. She could feel it. Time slipping, her strength fading. But she kept going. Because that's what she had always done. Not for recognition. Not for approval. But because someone had to. She reached the west flank just as another soldier went down. This one older, more experienced, but the same fear in his eyes. "Stay with me," she said again, kneeling beside him. The same words. The same calm. Even as her own hands began to tremble. Just slightly. Just enough for her to notice. But not enough for him to see. She worked quickly, focused. But this time it was harder. Her vision blurred. Her breath shortened. And for the first time, doubt crept in. What if I can't finish this? She clenched her jaw. Pushed it back. Not now. Not here. Not when it mattered. Because there was still something she hadn't told them. Something none of them knew. Not the team. Not the command. Not even the ones who thought they understood her. She finished the treatment, secured him. "Evac is coming," she said. He nodded, gripping her wrist. You saved me." She didn't respond. Didn't have the strength to. She stood up slowly. And that's when it hit her. Not a bullet. Not an explosion. But something deeper. Her body giving way. She staggered. Just a step. But enough for someone to notice. "Hey, you're hit." Voices turned. Eyes shifted. For the first time, they were looking at her. Really looking. Not as the quiet one. Not as the extra. But as something else. Something they didn't understand yet. She tried to steady herself. Tried to keep moving. But her legs didn't listen. The ground rushed up. And the world faded. The last thing she heard before everything went dark was a voice. Firm, commanding, familiar. "Get her out of there now." And then silence. But the story didn't end there. Because sometimes, the ones no one notices are the ones carrying the heaviest truths. And sometimes, the strongest warriors are the ones who never needed to be seen. Not until it was almost too late. Why did the chief medic freeze when he saw her face? The medevac helicopter hadn't even fully touched down when they rushed her in. Boots pounded against metal, voices overlapped. Controlled chaos, but urgent. Always urgent. Gunshot wounds, multiple, she's losing blood. Vitals dropping, BP unstable. "Get IV access now." The stretcher slid across the floor as the medical team moved with practiced precision. Hands worked fast, gloves snapped, instruments clattered into place. But then, the chief medic stepped forward and stopped, just for a second too long. His eyes narrowed, not in confusion but recognition. "No," he whispered under his breath. No one else noticed. "Not yet." "Sir," one of the junior medics asked, "we're losing her." That pulled him back. "Move," he snapped, stepping in. "Let's go, stay focused." His hands took over instantly, cutting through fabric, exposing the wounds, assessing damage. One shot through the side, another clean pass along the rib line. Blood loss was significant, too much. But her face. He kept stealing glances, trying to confirm what his instincts were already screaming. It couldn't be. Not here. Not like this. "Clamp that no higher. You're missing the source," he said sharply, guiding the younger medic's hands. They adjusted, pressure stabilized slightly. "Pulse. Fatting." "Not on my watch," he muttered. He leaned closer, closer to her face. Brushed away the dirt, the dried blood. And there it was. That scar. Faint, barely visible, running just along her jawline. Old, healed, but unmistakable. His breath caught. "Sir," the medic pressed again. But he didn't answer right away. Because now he knew. And everything suddenly felt heavier. "Keep working," he said finally, voice lower now. Controlled but different. Respect had slipped into it. Unspoken but real. Because the woman lying in front of them wasn't just another soldier. She was something else. Something they hadn't realized they had been standing beside this whole time. Back in the chaos of the battlefield, her team still didn't understand what had just happened. "She went down," one of them asked, disbelief cutting through his voice. "She was still moving 5 seconds ago." "Yeah, and she took 2 hits like it was nothing." Silence followed that. Because deep down they all knew. That wasn't normal. Not the way she moved. Not the way she stayed calm. Not the way she kept choosing others over herself. Something about her had been different. But they hadn't asked. Hadn't looked closer. And now it was too late for questions. Back in the med bay, the chief medic worked relentlessly. "Stay with me," he said quietly, almost to himself this time. It wasn't a command. It was a plea. A rare crack in the armor of someone who had seen too many not make it. Her vitals dipped again. A long, flat tone threatened to break through the rhythm of machines. "Come on," he whispered. His hands pressed harder. Focused. Precise. Because he remembered. He remembered a different battlefield. Different terrain. Different chaos. Years ago. A mission that had gone sideways faster than anyone expected. They had been pinned down, outnumbered, cut off. And he had been the one bleeding out. Vision fading. Breath shallow. Ready to accept that it was over. Until she showed up. Out of nowhere. Like a ghost moving through gunfire. He remembered the calm in her eyes. The same calm he saw now. Even unconscious. Even broken. "Don't close your eyes," she had told him back then. Her voice steady, unshaken. He had tried to respond, couldn't. She didn't wait. Just worked. Fast, efficient, like his life was just another problem she intended to solve. And somehow, she did. She pulled him out. Carried him, literally carried him, when no one else could reach them. Saved him. Then disappeared before he could even properly thank her. No name. No recognition. Just gone. Until now. "Sir, we're losing her," the medic's voice snapped him back again. Her heart rate was crashing. Time was running out. He leaned in closer. "You don't get to do this," he said under his breath. "Not after everything." Another injection. Another adjustment. Push. The team responded instantly. Seconds stretched. Felt like minutes. Felt like everything. And then, a pulse. Weak. But there. "She's back," someone said, relief breaking through. But the chief medic didn't relax. "Not yet. Stabilize her, we're not done." They worked for what felt like hours. In reality, it was minutes. Carefully closing wounds. Managing blood loss. Fighting for every inch of stability. And slowly, she started to hold. Her breathing evened slightly. Her vitals steadied barely. But enough. Enough to keep her here. The chief medic finally stepped back. Just a little. His eyes never leaving her. "Who is she?" one of the medics asked quietly. He hesitated, because saying it out loud made it real. Made it heavier. But they deserved to know. "She's the reason I'm standing here today," he said simply. They looked at him. Confused. Waiting. He exhaled slowly. "She's a SEAL." That got their attention. But he wasn't finished. Not just any SEAL. A pause. Then, "She's the one they don't talk about." Silence filled the room. Because in their world, that meant something. It meant classified. It meant missions that didn't exist. It meant sacrifices no one would ever hear about. He looked back at her. At the quiet strength even in stillness. "At one point," he added softly, "she was the best we had." The words hung in the air. Heavy. Almost unreal. Because the woman they had barely noticed hours ago. The quiet one. The one no one questioned. No one praised. Had been something legendary. And none of them had known. Outside, the battlefield had gone quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that comes after everything has already been decided. Her team sat scattered, some injured, some just processing. "She saved 3 of us," one of them said finally. "While bleeding out," another added. No one argued. Because they had all seen it. And now, they were starting to understand. Back inside, the chief medic pulled up a chair beside her. Sat down slowly. For a moment, he just watched her. The rise and fall of her chest. The faint color returning to her skin. "You always did this," he murmured. No response. Just the steady beep of machines. "You show up when it matters and disappear before anyone can catch up." His jaw tightened slightly. A mix of frustration and something else. Respect. Maybe even guilt. "Why didn't you say anything?" he asked quietly. But deep down, he already knew the answer. Because she never had. Not back then. Not now. For her, it was never about being known. It was about doing what needed to be done. Nothing more. Nothing less. He leaned back. Eyes still on her. "Rest," he said softly, "you've done enough." But even as he said it, he knew she wouldn't see it that way. Because people like her never did. They carried more than their share. Silently. Relentlessly. Until their bodies forced them to stop. And even then, they fought to keep going. The room dimmed slightly as the urgency faded into quiet watchfulness. But the story, it wasn't over. Not even close. Because the truth about who she really was had only just begun to surface. And when she finally opened her eyes, nothing would be the same. Why did her fingers twitch right when they thought she wouldn't wake up? The room was quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful. Machines hummed softly. A steady rhythm of beeps marked time, slow, fragile but present. Outside, boots still moved, voices still echoed, but in here everything had narrowed down to a single breath. Her breath. The chief medic hadn't left. Not really. Even when others rotated shifts, even when protocol said he should rest, he stayed close. Sometimes standing, sometimes sitting, always watching. Because something about this felt unfinished. Like the story wasn't ready to let go of her yet. "She's stable," one of the nurses said quietly, "as much as she can be." He nodded, but his eyes didn't move. Stable didn't mean safe. Not with injuries like that. Not with someone who had pushed her body that far. Hours passed. Or maybe it was longer. Time had a strange way of bending in places like this. And then, a slight movement. Barely noticeable. Just her fingers shifting. At first, no one reacted. It could have been nothing. Reflex, muscle memory, the body echoing signals without meaning. But then it happened again. Stronger. Deliberate. The chief medic leaned forward instantly. "Hey," he said, voice low but urgent, "stay with me." Her eyelids fluttered. Slow. Heavy. Like lifting them took everything she had left. The light hit her eyes, and for a moment there was nothing behind them. Just emptiness. But then, focus. A flicker of awareness. Confusion. Pain. And something deeper. Something that didn't belong to someone waking up for the first time. Something that belonged to someone who had been here before. Her lips parted slightly. No sound came out. But she was trying. "She's coming around," the nurse called out. More movement, more voices, controlled urgency returning. But he stayed close. Closer than protocol allowed. "It's okay," he said. "You're safe." Her eyes shifted. Scanning. Not panicked but searching. Like she was trying to piece together where she was and why. And then her gaze landed on him. For a second. Nothing. No recognition. Just a blank connection between two people. But then, her brow tightened. A faint crease. Memory pushing through the fog. "You," she whispered. It barely made a sound. But he heard it. A small breath escaped him. "Yeah," he said quietly, "took you long enough." It wasn't a joke. Not really. More like relief trying to find a shape. Her eyes stayed on him. Studying. Confirming. And then she closed them again. Not unconscious. Just tired. "Don't go back out," he said quickly, a hint of urgency slipping through. "Stay with me." A pause. Then barely audible. "Team. Even now. Even like this." That was her first thought. Not herself. Not the pain. Not the fact that she had almost died. Her team. "They're alive," he answered, "because of you." Silence. But something in her expression shifted. Not pride. Not relief. Just acceptance. Like that was all that mattered. Her breathing steadied again. But her grip, weak as it was, tightened slightly against the blanket. A small detail. But he noticed. "You pushed too far," he said softly. Her eyes opened again. Just a fraction. And for a moment, there was something almost like defiance in them. "Even now. You always do." No response. But she didn't deny it. Because she couldn't. Because it was true. A few more medics stepped in, checking vitals, adjusting lines, monitoring everything. "She shouldn't be awake this soon," one of them muttered. "She shouldn't be alive," another added under their breath. The chief medic didn't correct them, because they weren't wrong, but they also didn't understand. Not yet. She needs rest, the nurse said gently. We should sedate her again. He hesitated, just for a second, then nodded. Light dose, he said. Don't push her too far under. They prepared the injection. Moved carefully. Everything controlled. Professional. But as the needle slid in, her hand moved again. Gripping. This time his wrist. Stronger than before. Surprising. He looked down. Met her eyes again. Fully open now. Clearer. Focused. No, she breathed. It was weak, but certain. A refusal. A boundary. He frowned slightly. You need it, he said. Your body. Not yet. 2 words. Broken. But firm. A quiet kind of strength that didn't need volume. The room stilled, because something about the way she said it made people listen, even when they shouldn't, even when protocol said otherwise. He studied her for a long moment, weighing the decision. Logic versus instinct. Protocol versus understanding. Then, hold, he said. The nurse paused. Sir, she needs. I said hold. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't need to be. The room obeyed. He looked back at her. Why? He asked quietly. Her breathing hitched slightly. Pain flickered across her face, but she held his gaze. Report. Of course. Even now. Even like this. Duty came first. Always. You can't even sit up, he said, not harshly, just real. But she didn't look away. Didn't back down. Because for her, it wasn't about ability. It was about responsibility. A long silence stretched between them. And in that silence, he understood. This wasn't about stubbornness. It was about who she was. What she carried. What she refused to let go unfinished. He exhaled slowly. Then nodded. 2 minutes, he said. That's it. The others exchanged looks. Confused. But no one argued. Because something about this moment felt bigger than procedure. He leaned closer. Talk. Her voice was barely there. Each word cost something. But she pushed through. Rooftop third wasn't alone. He stilled. What? Her eyes sharpened slightly, fighting through the haze. Spotter didn't fire. A pause. Watching. That changed everything. The room shifted. Energy tightening. Because that meant the threat wasn't over. Someone had been there, seen everything, and chosen not to act. Why? The question hung heavy. Unanswered. But dangerous. You're sure? He asked. A small nod. That was all. But it was enough. He stood immediately. I need this relayed now. One of the medics rushed out. The atmosphere changed again. From recovery back to alert. Back to unfinished business. He turned back to her. But her eyes were already fading again. Strength slipping. You did enough, he said quietly. This time softer. More certain. Her grip on his wrist loosened. Slowly. And then it was gone. Her eyes closed. Her body finally giving in to what it had been holding back. Rest. Real rest. The kind she had been denying herself for far too long. The room settled again. But not the same as before. Now there was tension underneath. A new layer. A new threat. And at the center of it, her. Still. silent, but somehow still leading the fight, even from a hospital bed. The chief medic looked at her for a long moment, then quietly said, "You never really left the battlefield, did you?" No answer, just the steady rhythm of machines. But somehow, it felt like the story had just taken a deeper turn, because survival wasn't the end. For people like her, it was only the beginning of the next fight. Why would someone watch a battlefield and choose not to pull the trigger? The question lingered long after her voice had faded. It didn't fit. Not in a place like that. Not in a moment where everything was chaos, instinct, survival. You don't watch in a firefight. You act. You shoot or you disappear. But someone had stayed. Someone had seen everything she did, every shot, every movement, every decision, and held back. That wasn't hesitation. That was intention. And intention meant something far more dangerous than fear. The chief medic stood just outside the dim recovery room, listening as the report was relayed through secure channels. His jaw was tight, his mind moving faster than his words ever could. "Repeat that," a voice crackled over the comms. "You're saying there was a second presence on the rooftop?" "Yes," the medic confirmed. "Unidentified, no engagement." A pause. Then, "Get eyes on every surrounding structure. I want confirmation. Thermal, drones, everything." Orders started moving. Fast. Because now this wasn't just a recovery situation. It was unfinished. And somewhere out there, someone knew it. Inside the room, she lay still again. But her stillness didn't feel empty. It felt loaded. Like even in rest, her mind hadn't fully stepped away from the fight. Her breathing was steady but shallow, the kind of breath that comes after pushing beyond the limit, the kind that says the body survived, but barely. A nurse adjusted her IV line carefully. "She shouldn't have stayed conscious that long," she murmured to another medic. "It's not normal." "No," the other replied quietly, glancing at the door. "Neither is she." And that was the truth none of them could fully explain yet. Outside, the air carried tension. Not loud, not chaotic, but sharp, focused. The kind of tension that comes when something unseen is still out there, waiting. Back on the battlefield, a small recon drone hovered above the rooftops, scanning. Heat signatures flickered, faded, returned, but nothing clear, nothing solid. "Negative visual," a voice reported. "If someone was there, they're gone." Gone. Just like that. No trace. No mistake. That kind of disappearance wasn't luck. It was skill. And that made it worse. Because skilled enemies didn't leave accidents behind. They left messages. The chief medic stepped back into the room slowly. His eyes went straight to her. Still resting. Still fighting something internal no one else could see. He pulled a chair closer again. Sat. Watched. Because now, this wasn't just about keeping her alive. It was about understanding what she had walked into. And what might still be coming. "You always find the things no one else sees," he said quietly. No response. But something in her breathing shifted. Subtle. Almost unnoticeable. Like a part of her was still listening. Still tracking. Still there. His gaze softened slightly. "You couldn't just let it end, could you?" Of course not. That wasn't who she was. For her, unfinished meant unacceptable. Even if it cost her everything. Hours passed again. Slow. Measured. The kind of waiting that stretches your thoughts too far. And then, a flicker. Her eyes opened. This time quicker. More aware. Pain was still there. Deep, sharp, but so was something else. Clarity. You shouldn't be awake, he said, not unkindly. Her lips moved slightly. Neither should they. He frowned. What? Her gaze shifted toward the ceiling. Not really looking at it. Looking past it. He wasn't alone. There it was again. Not confusion. Not doubt. Certainty. The kind that comes from instinct trained over years. You said that before, he replied. We scanned, nothing came up. A pause. Then, because he wanted it that way. The words were quiet, but they landed heavy. Because that meant control, planning, a presence that wasn't reacting but shaping. He leaned forward slightly. You think this was deliberate? Her eyes met his, and for the first time since she woke, there was something sharp in them. Something almost cold. A side of her that hadn't surfaced yet. I know it was. Silence followed. Not because there was nothing to say, but because suddenly there was too much. You were the target, he asked carefully. A beat. Then, no. Another pause. Not just me. That changed the shape of everything. Because this wasn't about one soldier. One mission. One mistake. It was bigger. And she had seen it. Even through blood loss. Even through chaos. She had seen the pattern. The same way she always did. The same way that had made her who she was. You're not cleared to be thinking about this, he said quietly. Your job right now is to recover. A faint shift at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile. Not quite anything soft. Never was my job. That was the closest thing to honesty she had offered. Because she had never stayed inside the lines. Never followed the simple version of things. She saw too much. Carried too much. And it never left her. The room felt smaller now. Tighter. Like the walls themselves understood something had changed. You need to let this go, he said, though even as he spoke, he knew she wouldn't. Because people like her didn't let go. They held on. Even when it broke them. Especially then. Her breathing grew uneven again. Pain catching up. Reality pressing back in. But she didn't look away. Didn't close her eyes. Check the comms, she whispered. He blinked. What? Before the hit, interference. Fragments. But meaningful. Pieces of something unfinished. He stood immediately. Stay here, he said. It wasn't a command. Just habit. Because there was nowhere she could go. And both of them knew it. He stepped outside again, calling for the communications officer. Pull logs from 10 minutes before the ambush, he ordered. I want anomalies, static, interruptions, anything. Sir, we already ran. Run it again. This time slower. Deeper. Because now they knew what to look for. Minutes passed. Then, sir. A pause. There's something. He turned sharply. What kind of something? A signal, brief, encrypted, doesn't match any of ours. His expression hardened. Location. Near the rooftop she mentioned. Of course it was. Because she didn't guess. She saw. Even when no one else did. Back in the room, she had closed her eyes again. But she wasn't asleep. Not fully. Her mind moved in fragments. Images. Angles. Moments replaying. The rooftop. The shadow. The stillness of someone who didn't belong to the chaos, but controlled it. And beneath it all, a quiet realization. This wasn't over. Not even close. Her fingers shifted slightly against the blanket. A small movement, but intentional, because somewhere deep inside, past the pain, past the exhaustion, past everything, her body was begging her to stop. She had already made a decision. And it wasn't to rest. It was to finish it. Even if no one asked her to. Even if no one understood. Because for her, some battles don't end when the shooting stops. They end when the truth is finally seen. And she had seen just enough to know this one was only beginning. Why would command suddenly go silent, right when the truth was getting close? It didn't happen loudly. No alarms, no urgent warnings. Just absence. The kind that feels wrong the moment you notice it. The chief medic stood in the operations tent, eyes locked on the screen as the communications officer replayed the signal logs again. Lines of data scrolled past, timestamps, interference spikes, encrypted bursts. There, the officer said, pointing. That's the anomaly, 6 seconds, encrypted, then gone. Origin. Still tracing. Keep going. But even as he said it, something shifted. A delay. Subtle. Barely noticeable. The kind of lag that shouldn't exist in a system built for real-time coordination. Why isn't command responding? He asked, glancing over. The officer frowned, tapping the headset. They were just online a minute ago. Static answered. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just enough to feel deliberate. The chief medic's jaw tightened. Because now it wasn't just the battlefield that felt off. It was everything around it. Back in the recovery room, she felt it too. Not through machines. Not through signals. But through something deeper. The same instinct that had kept her alive when logic failed. Her eyes opened slowly. No panic. Just awareness. They pulled back, she whispered. The nurse nearby looked confused. What? But she didn't answer. Because she wasn't talking to them. She was following a thread only she could see. A pattern forming behind the chaos. Her breathing steadied, even as pain lingered. Her body was still broken. Still recovering. But her mind, it was already moving again. Already stepping back onto the battlefield, no one else could fully understand. Outside, tension spread quietly. What do you mean they're not responding? One of the soldiers asked. I mean exactly that, the comms officer replied. No confirmation, no orders, nothing. That's not protocol. No, it's not. Silence followed. Because protocol exists for a reason. And when it breaks, something bigger is usually behind it. The chief medic stepped away from the console slowly. Thinking. Connecting pieces. Rooftop observer. Encrypted signal. Now silence from command. None of it felt random. None of it felt accidental. She said there was interference before the ambush, he murmured. The officer nodded. Yeah, and now we've got interference after it too. A pause. Then, you thinking what I'm thinking? He didn't answer right away. Because saying it out loud made it real. Someone wanted control of that moment, he said finally. Before, during, and now after. And command just disappears. Or gets pushed out. That landed heavier. Because pushing out command wasn't simple. It required access. Knowledge. Precision. The kind of precision only someone on the inside, or someone very close to it, could have. Back in the room, she shifted slightly. Pain flared instantly. Sharp. Unforgiving. Her body reminded her exactly where she stood. Or rather, where she couldn't stand. For a moment, her eyes closed again. A flicker of weakness, of exhaustion, of something dangerously close to breaking. Because even she had limits. Even she could feel the weight of it all pressing down. And for a brief second, a thought slipped through. What if I can't finish this? It stayed there longer than it should have. Long enough to hurt. Long enough to feel real. Her hand tightened against the sheet. Fingers curling. Rejecting it. Because that wasn't who she was. Not when it mattered. Especially not when it mattered. Her eyes opened again. Clearer now. Focused. She looked toward the door. He's still here. The nurse hesitated. Who? But again, no answer. Because she wasn't guessing. She was remembering. The rooftop. The stillness. The control. That kind of presence doesn't leave. It relocates. It adapts. It waits. And right now, it was still waiting. The chief medic returned moments later, his expression heavier than before. He stepped inside quietly. But she was already looking at him. You feel it too, she said softly. It wasn't a question. He didn't pretend otherwise. Command gone dark. A faint nod. No surprise. Because she had already reached that conclusion. Signal, she asked. Encrypted, short burst. We traced it near your rooftop. Her gaze drifted slightly. Not away. Just inward. Processing. Not just communication, she whispered. He frowned. What do you mean? A pause. Her breathing slowed. Measured. Like she was choosing each word carefully. Trigger. The word hung in the air. Different. Heavier. Trigger for what? Her eyes met his again. And this time, there was no softness left. Just clarity. Timing. That shifted everything. Because that meant the ambush wasn't just planned. It was activated. Controlled down to the second. And the rooftop, he asked. Confirmation. Silence filled the room. Because now the pieces didn't just connect. They aligned. Too perfectly. Someone had set the stage. Waited. Watched. Then executed. And now, they were still out there. Watching what came next. You think they're tracking us now? He asked quietly. Her answer came without hesitation. Yes. No fear in it. Just truth. The kind that doesn't need emphasis. He exhaled slowly, running a hand across his face. This isn't over, is it? A faint shake of her head. No. Not even close. Another wave of pain hit her. Stronger this time. Her body reminding her again of its limits. Her breath caught. Just for a second. But he saw it. You're done pushing, he said firmly. Whatever this is, we'll handle it. Her eyes flickered. And for the first time, something like frustration surfaced. Not anger. Not defiance. Just resistance. Because she had heard those words before. We'll handle it. And every time, she had been the one who ended up stepping in anyway. You don't see it yet, she whispered. That stung more than it should have. Because part of him knew. She was right. What am I missing? He asked. A long pause. Her strength fading again. But she pushed one more time. They let me live. The words landed harder than anything else she had said. Because that didn't make sense. Not in an ambush like that. Not with her position. Not with her visibility. You were hit twice, he said. Not fatally. A beat. On purpose. Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Because if that was true, then she wasn't just a survivor. She was part of the plan, not by choice, but by design. A message, a piece left behind, to lead somewhere, to reveal something, or to draw something out. The chief medic stared at her, really seeing it now. The pattern, the intention, and the danger. "They want you to move," he said slowly. Her eyes didn't leave his. "Yes, and if you do," a faint breath, "barely there. We find them. Or they find her." The thought didn't need to be spoken, because it was already there. Between them. Unavoidable. He looked away for a moment, weighing it. Risk, duty, reality. Then back at her. "You can't even stand," he said quietly. A pause. Then, "I won't need to." That was the moment he understood. This wasn't about chasing, or fighting, or even surviving. This was about finishing something that had already started. And she, broken, wounded, barely holding on, was still at the center of it. Not because she wanted to be, but because she was the only one who could see it clearly. Outside, the silence deepened. Not empty, not safe, just waiting. And inside that quiet room, the truth settled in. This wasn't a mission gone wrong. It was something else entirely. Something designed. Something patient. Something that hadn't revealed its final move yet. And the most dangerous part, it didn't need to rush, because it already knew exactly where she was. Why would she choose to walk back into the fight when she could finally rest? The question stayed in the air long after no one said it out loud. Because everyone knew the answer, even before she did. The room was dim, quiet again, machine steady, controlled, predictable, the kind of calm most soldiers prayed for after chaos. But for her, it felt wrong, incomplete. Her eyes opened slowly, not with panic this time, but with certainty. The kind that doesn't rush, the kind that settles deep, like something already decided long before the moment arrives. The chief medic was there. Of course he was. Leaning back in the chair, arms crossed, exhaustion written into every line of his face. He hadn't slept. Not really. Not since she came in. "You're awake again," he said quietly without looking surprised. A small pause. "Never really slept." Her voice was stronger now. Still fragile. Still carrying the weight of pain. But steadier. Like something inside her had aligned. He studied her for a moment. "You should have." A faint shift in her expression. Not quite a smile. Not yet. There it was again. That refusal to be done. That quiet resistance to rest. He exhaled slowly, leaning forward. "Commands back online," he said. "Partial, delayed. They're feeding us fragments, not answers." Her gaze didn't change, because she already expected that. "They're watching too." Not fear. Not suspicion. Just a statement. And somehow that made it heavier. "We're pulling you out," he continued. "Full evac, you're done here." Silence followed. But it wasn't agreement. It never was with her. No. One word. Soft. But final. He closed his eyes briefly. "Don't do this." She didn't respond right away. Her eyes drifted slightly, to the window, to the faint light beyond it, to something unseen but understood. "They won't stop. That's not your responsibility anymore." That landed harder than anything else. Because for a second, just a second, something flickered inside her. Doubt. Not about the mission, but about herself, about whether she was allowed to stop, allowed to let go, allowed to be human. Her hand shifted slightly on the bed. Weak, but intentional. When was it ever not? The question wasn't defensive. It wasn't angry. It was honest. And that honesty cut deeper than any argument. Because he didn't have an answer. Not one that would change her mind. Not one that would undo everything she had become. A long silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable. Just heavy. "You're not invincible," he said finally. Her eyes met his again. Clear. Certain. "I know." And she did. That was the difference. She never believed she couldn't break. She just chose to move anyway. Even when she already felt the cracks. Outside, the air had shifted again. More movement now. More voices. Quiet coordination. Something was building. Not chaos, but intention. Inside the room, she slowly pushed herself up. Pain hit instantly. Sharp. Relentless. Her breath caught. Her body protested. Every muscle, every nerve, every wound reminding her exactly what she had survived. And what it would cost to keep going. "Don't," he said immediately, stepping forward. "You're tearing yourself open." But she didn't stop. Not fully. Just enough to sit halfway. Enough to feel the weight of gravity again. Enough to remind herself. She was still here. Still capable. Still needed. Her hand pressed lightly against her side. Blood seeped again. Slow. Controlled. But real. "You see," he said, frustration slipping through now, "you're not ready." A pause. Her breathing steadied. Then, "They think I am." That changed the tone completely. Because this wasn't about readiness. It was about perception. And perception was exactly what the enemy was playing with. "They're expecting you to move," he said. A faint nod. "Yes. And you're going to give them that." Another pause. Longer this time. Because this part mattered. "No." He blinked. Thrown off for the first time. "What?" Her eyes held his. Steady. Focused. "I'm going to finish it. Not by chasing. Not by reacting. But by ending it. On her terms." That was the difference. And he saw it now. Finally. The plan wasn't to follow the trail. It was to become the last step in it. "They're watching for a pattern," she said quietly. "Movement, reaction, fear." Her voice gained strength with each word. "They want me to run toward them. A beat. So I won't." Silence. Because now it made sense. All of it. The rooftop. The signal. The controlled shots. They weren't just tracking her. They were studying her. Waiting for her to act the way she always did. Predictable in her courage. And that was their mistake. Because courage doesn't always move forward. Sometimes. It waits. The chief medic stepped back slightly. Not resisting anymore. Just understanding. "What do you need?" he asked. No argument. No orders. Just trust. Her answer came without hesitation. Silence. Outside, orders shifted. Not louder. Not faster. Just different. Less movement. Less signal. Less presence. A deliberate quiet. The kind that doesn't draw attention. The kind that lets something hidden come closer. Back in the room, she eased herself back down. Not in defeat. Not in surrender. but in control. Her breathing slowed. Her body stilled. Not weak. Just waiting. Minutes passed. Then longer. No one spoke. No one interrupted. Even the machine seemed quieter. And then, a flicker. On the monitor. A brief spike. Not from her. From the system. The comms unit in the corner gave a faint crackle. So soft it could have been missed. But she heard it. Of course she did. Her eyes opened instantly. Sharp. Alive. There. The chief medic turned. "Trace it," he ordered immediately. The comms officer moved fast. Fingers flying. "It's the same encryption," short burst. "Location." A pause. Then, "Close." Too close. Inside the perimeter. The room shifted instantly. Tension snapping tight. "They're here," someone whispered. But she didn't move. Didn't panic. Didn't reach for anything. She just watched. Listened. Because this was the moment. The one they had been shaping from the beginning. Footsteps approached. Slow. Careful. Not rushing. Not afraid. The door handle moved. A quiet click. And then, it opened. A figure stood there. Not in uniform. Not chaotic. Calm. Controlled. Just like the rooftop. For a second, no one moved. No one spoke. And then, her voice broke the silence. Soft. Steady. "Took you long enough." The figure tilted their head slightly. Studying her. The same way she studied everything. "You're sharper than they said," the voice replied. Not hostile. Not rushed. Just measured. A mirror. The chief medic stepped forward slightly. Protective. But she lifted a hand. Weak but enough. "Stop." Because this wasn't his moment. This was hers. Always had been. "You watched," she said. A pause. Then, "Yes." No denial. No hesitation. "Why?" The figure's gaze didn't shift. "Because I needed to see if you were still who they believed you were." Silence. Heavy. Then, and a faint breath. Almost like respect. "You are." That wasn't comfort. That was confirmation. Of something much bigger. Much darker. "They sent you," she said. Not a question. "No," the figure replied. A beat. "I came because they're afraid of what you see." That landed deeper than anything else. Because fear, from the kind of people who control things like this, meant truth. And truth was the one thing no one could contain forever. The room felt smaller now. Like everything had led to this exact point. "You could have killed me," she said. Another pause. "Yes." "Why didn't you?" The answer came quietly. Almost thoughtfully. "Because some people aren't meant to be erased." A long silence followed. Then, "Just understood." Her words finished the thought. Not his. Hers. And in that moment, something shifted. Not victory. Not defeat. But clarity. The kind that doesn't need noise. The kind that settles into the bones. The figure stepped back slightly. Not retreating. Just stepping out of the center. "This isn't over," they said. A faint nod. "It never is." And somehow, that wasn't fear. It wasn't even tension anymore. It was acceptance. Because some battles don't end clean, don't wrap themselves into conclusions. They just change shape. The figure turned, walked away. No rush, no resistance. Gone as quietly as they had arrived. The room stayed still. No one moved. Not for a while. Because something had just happened that none of them fully understood. Except her. She lay back slowly, eyes closing again. Not from weakness, but from something deeper. Completion. Not of the mission, but of her part in it. The chief medic stepped closer, watched her carefully. "You let them go," he said. Her breathing softened. Even. Calm. They were never mine to keep. A pause. Then softer. Just to find. Silence wrapped around the room again. But this time, it felt different. Not empty. Not waiting. Just still. And in that stillness, the truth settled quietly. Strength isn't always in the fight. It isn't always in the moment of impact. Sometimes, it's in knowing when to hold the line and when to let something pass through it. Because dignity doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't demand to be seen. Sometimes, it simply acts and disappears, just like she always did.